Okay, so I realized that we did not get to finish this today. So I really want to make sure that you guys understand this for the assignment that's tomorrow or today, Friday, depending on when you're watching this. So let's get back to where we were. The dot left, not right. So just as a review, you know what? I'm going to review the second one. Okay. Leading zeros never count. Okay. So if it's 0.000 something, those zeros don't count. Trailing zeros don't count unless there is a decimal. So if it's 0.0500, those trailing zeros do count because there was a decimal. Okay? I think this one's the easiest one to remember. And then exact numbers are counting numbers, conversion factors, and they have infinite number of sig figs. So we did this part, and you guys, I think, are pretty good at understanding how many sig figs are in each. So there are no there's no leading zeros here, but there is one trailing zero that you do count because there is a dot or a decimal. So there are 5 sig figs here. This trailing zero also does count because there is a decimal. So all of them are counted. This one, there is no decimal. So this trailing zero does not count. So there is only 5 sig figs here, and I'm underlining what's significant. For scientific notation numbers, just the numbers that are in front of the times 10 to the something are significant. So just that 3.29. These guys, leading zeros are never significant. So that's 2. And then there is no decimal in here. So it's just the 3 and the 2 are significant. The last zeros don't count. And I think there is another one that I can't see. And then the last one says, why can't I move this? I don't know what that does. I can't move this, so I can't see it. But the last one says something like 3 dogs. Oh, that went away. 3 dogs, and that is infinity sig figs. All right. Rounding rules. 5 or more round up. So if you're rounding something to 2 sig figs, you're looking at the number that's right after it. So we're looking at this number, and we're looking at this number to whether we round this one up or down. All right, so we're rounding everything to 2 sig figs. So let's go to the answer. So if we want 2 sig figs, leading zeros don't count. You still need to keep them there, okay, to hold the place, but then you report 2 sig figs after that. So we're looking at the 4. It's lower than 5, so it's just going to get cut off. The next one, again, we want to keep those zeros in front. They don't count as significant figures. We're looking at this last 5. 5 or up, you round up, so we get 0.0055. Right here, we're looking at the 1. Okay, we don't care about the 9 because we want 2 sig figs. There's 1 and there's 1. And so we're looking at the 1 after that, which is the 1, and that just rounds down. The next one, we're looking, it's 3, 4, and what's after the 4 is a 6. That's going to bump that 4 up. And then the last one, or not the last one, I see that there's another one there. 234.78. Okay, we need to keep 2 sig figs, but we also want to keep the value of the 200s, right? So if we look at this 4, okay, because 2 and 3 will keep, and then the 4, is it going to round up or down? Well, the 4 rounds down, so we cut them off. But if we add that 0, we still have the value of 230 something, okay? If you don't put a decimal, it's not significant, and so we still only have 2 sig figs. And then the last one, if it moves like stupid. Okay, the last one, right? We have the 1 and the 2, and now we're looking at the 7. The 7's going to round the 2 up by 1. And then if we keep those zeros and not put a decimal, we still are only reporting 2 significant figures. Okay? But we get to keep all of the money. All right, so now if we're doing calculations, okay, I think this is where we stop. Generally, the number of sig figs in an answer is the least certain number in the problem, okay? So let me show you what that is. So first, there's 2 rules you guys just have to remember. You just have to memorize it. I don't know a great way for you to memorize this. So multiplication and division, we are looking at sig figs, okay? For addition and subtraction, we're going to be looking at decimal places. I know that's confusing because this whole lesson is about sig figs, but these are the two things for calculations, okay? So let's say we have this example and we're going to multiply. So the sig figs rule comes into play. So let's say you put this in the calculator and you get 12.76. I have to round it according to whichever of the numbers they gave me has the least number of sig figs. So 6.38 has 3 sig figs. 2.0 has 2 sig figs. So therefore my answer can only have 2 sig figs because between those two numbers, 2 sig figs is lower than 3 sig figs. So my answer can only have 2 sig figs. So we're going to round to here to 13 because we're looking at that 7. 7 is 5 and up, so we're going to round that 2 up to a 3. And now we have the 2 sig figs that we want, and that's our answer. Again, the number of sig figs in your answer is the number in the least precise measurement. And again, least precise for multiplication and division means least number of sig figs. So let's say, let me see. Okay, so let's say that this is the calculation here and you plug it in and this is what your calculator is telling you. Well, 3.24 times 7.0. Multiplication is sig figs. So 3.24 has 3 sig figs. 7.0 has 2 sig figs. So our answer can only have 2 sig figs because that's the least number between the two. So we need to round this 22.68 to 2 sig figs, which means I'm looking at that 6, and it's going to round the 2 up to a 23. So we get 23, and meters times meters is meters squared. The next one, okay, we have 100, and we're going to divide by 23.7. Okay, let's count sig figs. The 100 number has 4 sig figs. The 23 number has 3, which is lower, which means our answer can only have and must have 3 sig figs. So if our calculator says this craziness, okay, then we are going to round to 3 sig figs, which means we're looking at the 1 and what's after the 1, which is a 9. So that 9 is going to round the 1 up, and we're going to get 4.22. We have our 3 sig figs, and G/cm cubed is our unit. Next one, 0.02, that only has 1 sig fig, 1 significant figure. The other one, it doesn't matter, it's got 4, okay? So our answer can only have 1 significant figure. So if our calculator says this, then the 4, and we're looking right at the 7. So is the 7 going to round the 4 up or down? It's going to round it up. And so, whoops, I went backwards. We're going to get 0.05. And that only still has 1 significant figure. And centimeter times centimeter is centimeter squared. Now we're going to divide. Now 710 without a decimal place only has 2 significant figures. 3.0 also only has 2 significant figures. So our answer can only have 2 significant figures. So how do we do that and keep the value of the 200s, right? Because a lot of people just say, well, it's 24. Well, I'd be upset if I went from 236 to just $24. So if we add a 0 there, so we're going to say 2 and 4, because that 6 is going to round the 3 up, and then we add a 0 with no decimal point, then that 0 is not significant, and we're still only reporting 2 sig figs. And then m divided by s is m/s, and that's your unit. You're going to have to know that. So that's those. All right, now let's talk about adding and subtracting, okay? So multiplication and division is about sig figs. Adding and subtracting is about decimal places, okay? So you just have to memorize those two things. I'm going to show you how to do that. Not how to memorize it, but how do I use this rule? All right, so let's say we have 6.8 plus 11.934, and the calculator gives me this number. I have to report the least precise number of decimal places as the least precise that I have. So 6.8, that's one decimal place. 0.8 is one decimal place. The other one, 11.934, that's 3 decimal places. So my answer has to be rounded to 1 decimal place because that's the least precise one. So how do I round that 18.734 to 1 decimal place? Well, I'm looking at that 3. Is it going to round up or down? It's going to round down. So we just cut it off and we get that, okay, 18.7. Rounded to 1 decimal place because that is the least precise measurement, is the 6.8 with 1 decimal place. All right, so let's try some more. Okay, so here's our calculation. 3.24 plus 7, and this is what the calculator says, okay? So the 3.24 has 2 decimal places. The 7.0 has 1 decimal place. So my answer has to be rounded to 1 decimal place. Well, so that means I'm looking at the 4 of what my calculator says, and I am going to cut it off. And meter plus meter is just meter. Now we're doing subtracting, but still looking at decimal places. So the 100 has 1 decimal place and the 23 has 2 decimal places. So my answer can only have 1 because that's the least precise measurement. So I put that in and the calculator gives me this, and I need to round it to 1 decimal place. So the 7 is going to round the 2 up to a 3, and grams minus grams is just grams. All right, now this one, 0.02, 2 decimal places. The other one has 3 decimal places. So my answer has to be rounded to 2 decimal places because that's the least precise. So how do we round this? Well, we're going to be looking at the 1. Okay, don't try to say, well, it's 2.4 or 2.40. No, because we're looking at the 1. And the 1 is just going to cut off. It's not going to round that 9 up. So you're going to get 2.39, and centimeter plus centimeter is just centimeter. Okay, next one. We have 1 decimal place and 3 decimal places. 1 decimal place is the least, so my answer is going to have to be reported to 1 decimal place. So we're looking at that second 2, all right? We're looking at the second 2, and we're going to have 709.2 because the 2 just gets cut off, okay? Don't try to say, well, the 8 goes to the 3, and then the 3, and no. Okay, that's too far away. The 8 was too far away. We're only looking at that 2. And liter minus liter is liter. All right, so that's it for that one. Okay, so what if you have both operations? Okay, you round appropriately for each rule, or using the appropriate rule after each operation. So I know you guys know the order of operations. You do either division or multiplication first, and then adding and subtracting after. So for this example, we're going to do our multiplication first. So we're doing 12.4 times 7.943. And we're going to get this number, 98.4932, in our calculator. Well, according to multiplication rules, we are looking at sig figs. 12.4 has 3 sig figs, and 7.943 has 4 sig figs. 3 is less, so I have to round my answer to 3 sig figs, not decimal places, okay, because multiplication is sig figs. So when I round that, then I'm looking, I have 9, I have 8, and then I'm looking at the 9 after the 4. So is that 9 going to round the 4 up? Yes. And so we have our answer of 3 significant figures. Now I can add in that second number, 0.0064. So here we have, I'm going to add the 98.5 plus 0.0064. And this is what the calculator says, 98.5, blah, blah, blah. Okay, adding is about decimal places. So let's look at our 2 decimal places. So we've got 1 decimal place for this one that we started with, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places for this one. Well, that doesn't matter because 1 is way less, which means our answer has to be rounded to 1 decimal place. So I'm looking at this 0 next to the 5, okay, and the 0 is just going to get cut off. So cut off everything else, and this is our answer. I know that that's kind of what we started with here, but that's okay. A lot of times this happens. Measurements get lost in sig figs. And just so you know, centimeter times centimeter is centimeters squared. And so that's why our final answer is centimeters squared. Please be mindful of units. All right, let's try this. I think I have a slide for this. Okay, so this one is adding, and adding is about decimal places. So you have to round it to one decimal place, 19.0. The next one is subtracting, again, decimal places. So our answer has to be rounded to one decimal place because this one only has one. Okay, and then looking at units. Now multiplication is about sig figs. This number has 3, and this number has 4. So our answer can only have 3 sig figs. So when you put it in, you're going to round it, and you're going to get 13.5. Feel free to check me on that. And centimeter times centimeter is centimeter squared. I know that that's not a squared, but you see it. All right, the last one. This one has 4 significant figures. This one has 2 significant figures. So our answer can only have 2 because that's the least. So when you plug it into your calculator, I'm going to round it so that I get 2 significant figures, which is 23, and then it's G/ml, and keep that unit. All right, and that's it. So let me know if you have any questions.